We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata. Mike, did you have a Merry Christmas?
I did. How was yours?
Good. I mean, outside of that Cincinnati Bengals game on Saturday, this is our first time
Yeah.
recording since that loss to Pittsburgh. It honestly felt like, and we'll do a little look back here, and then later in the week, we'll look ahead to the big matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But for the Cincinnati Bengals team, I was a little surprised and almost a little shocked with how they looked. But it also felt like one of those games where when it rains, it pours, almost like the Tennessee Titans vibe, where they were just never going to get back on track. And you really felt that way from the beginning. What were your takeaways? We'll start with the offense right now.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, my first takeaway is what was good about the offense to you? Like, can you name things?
I can name things. I can't say for like the whole entire game, but I would say obviously T. Higgins numbers were
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. T. Higgins
Um,
production. T. Higgins looked once again like he is going to number one guy for whatever that means. He steps up in that role.
and Yoshi at times. And I also thought he
Yeah.
had a
Early
touchdown.
on.
Yeah.
Those
And he,
early Yoshi was a factor. He would have had another catch, I remember, I think in the second half, but Browning threw it pretty high and almost got his ribs broken.
yeah,
So,
that was a bad ball. That was my first thought when he threw that was, oh my goodness,
yeah,
you got your receiver hurt.
like
But
technically a drop, but it's like you're leaving that guy to die. Um, I feel like with the offense, there wasn't much good. Like the we talked about it. The run game had to be usable, viable, whatever words you want to use for that. But the run game had to work. It didn't work again. And the numbers were actually inflated a little bit by garbage time because Mixon averaged under 2 yards a carry in the first half of that game. So the idea that you just keep pounding, you're pounding your head against the wall. If you can't run the ball, then you're stuck throwing the ball. And Jake Browning, the Cinderella run ended. The other shoe dropped, which I was worried about. I was pretty worried about that going into the game. Just like, man, I feel like this could be it because they got his number last time. You're without Jamar Chase. There's reasons to be optimistic because of how he played, but at the same time, these guys are backups for a reason. And all that, the bad faith analysis about how he was doing compared to Burrow and all that other stuff, it's just once you get into a situation like they had in Pittsburgh, you need high-end quarterback play, and they didn't get that. They get that with Burrow sometimes where run game's not working, the defense is bad, but you've got a guy that's going to keep you in that game. They didn't get that this time, and it started right away. I felt like Browning never got into a rhythm. He never looked like a good quarterback. Most of his plays were basically just big T. Higgins plays, at least all the big ones. And they moved the ball a little bit, not much. I think that's getting overstated with the 335 yards. But even when they moved the ball, the biggest plays by win probability added or lost were the 3 picks and the T. Higgins 80-yard, run, catch and run. So, and the 4th down miss to T. Higgins. So 4 out of the 5 were Browning misfires. I think, man, all 3 of those picks, various degrees, bad. I mean, was that the first one
the
that
first one when he threw it, when he wanted to throw it out of
he
bounds.
tried to throw it away and threw a pick in the red zone? That's unbelievably bad. That's just, what's the worst thing you could do in the red zone? Throw a pick. You're trying to throw the ball away? Why are you throwing it 20 yards downfield? It just has to get to the line of scrimmage. I don't know. I was that felt like the moment of, oh boy, this is not going well. Quarterback is not feeling it.
And those moments though, like watching that game, and I think you bring up a good point because there was all this talk and there's voices on the outside. Is Jake Browning better at quarterback over Joe Burrow? When we talked about it, we actually made fun of it a lot because we're like, no, that's not true. Almost every week when we were talking about it, it was exciting to see what Jake Browning was able to do, but they obviously changed the offense to adjust to Jake Browning. There were moments when he threw those interceptions that I thought, there's no way Joe Burrow's throwing that. And I'm not saying Joe Burrow's perfect and he doesn't throw interceptions, but when Joe Burrow's going to throw the ball away, he's not going to throw a pick. He's not going to throw right to the defender. His third interception, I thought, was really bad too. There was a lot of costly mistakes, and I agree with you because I think a lot of people look at the numbers and they say 335. That big T. Higgins touchdown was a big reason for that. You gain a lot of
80
yards from
yards.
that. Yeah.
And there
So
was just random, T. Higgins was also just making dunks down the field.
mhm.
It was like a lot of his yardage was just F it T's down there or T. Higgins catching runs. So not great.
Yeah, it wasn't. And sometimes you see these quarterback runs. You can even look at the New York Giants for an example. They have that backup quarterback who steps in, and then
DeVito.
yeah, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the Cinderella story is over. They get figured out by defenses, and maybe that's what happened. Then obviously, the Bengals have kind of struggled. They've obviously struggled with the AFC North this year. I know I hate to use this as an excuse. Joe Burrow hasn't been healthy for any of those games, but overall they looked bad. The first Baltimore game was the only game that I feel like you can look back on and say they still had a shot, even though they didn't play their best ball. With a few minutes to go in the second half, and then Joe Burrow tweaked his calf again, and that was unfortunate, and they fell in that game. So overall, just not to get all the way to the AFC North play or the AFC North picture right now being 0-5, but just with this offense right now, they need 2 wins. We'll do our prediction later when it comes to the Kansas City game in just a little bit. And obviously, Kansas City doesn't look like the Kansas City that I thought they would start to look like in December, and even as we get into January. But yeah, Jake Brown, I don't. What is your confidence level right now? I mean, he has proven if you can't run the ball and you have no run game that he's going to try and play hero ball, and it just doesn't work for him.
I think the most amazing thing about all three of those picks was that they all came against spot drop cover 3, which is like a high school type of defense. They got to him in different ways. And I think one of them, in theory, it might have made sense. So the second pick was that Y cross play, and he moves to the cross route, and he just never sees the curl flat defender in the window and throws it, which that has happened to him a few times now, where he just doesn't see a guy underneath and throws it and gets picked off. Happens as well with the other one. He just doesn't see the underneath defender, but it's just he did so well against that crazy, complex, non-traditional Tampa drop 8, throwing everything at you, quarters and whatever from Brian Flores, and he just did whatever he wanted against it. And then the Steelers run probably the most basic coverage possible, and he can't figure it out. It's just part of that is, teams don't play cover 3 against the Bengals normally because they have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but Chase was out. So they kind of let Higgins do what he wanted and then put their eyes on the quarterback. That's the part of spot drop, vision coverage. You're going to get your eyes on the quarterback in this situation so that you can break on the throw, make interceptions, make plays on the ball. And the quarterback just never found a way to beat it. I mean, the concepts they were running, they had answers, but the quarterback wasn't seeing it. So I don't know what you're supposed to do as a coaching staff in that situation, just because your quarterback's throwing you out of the game. And it's tough. I wouldn't say that I have no confidence in Browning against the Chiefs. I would say if I am the Chiefs, I am taking that game plan to see if he can beat some elementary stuff out there. And part of it's also, the Bengals offensive line dominated in every facet of this game, really. Right? Like they were giving up hits, giving up sacks, giving up pressure. But then also they were in that situation because they couldn't block, they couldn't run block, they couldn't move guys, they couldn't hold point, which is what I was really worried about. So they had no answers up front. They played a basic coverage behind it. The quarterback couldn't read it out correctly. And the offensive line didn't give him time to find answers either. So he had to hurry up. You could think of that second pick that he threw to the curl flat guy there. He had to avoid pressure before that throw. So it makes a little bit of sense that he never moved off his first read because he drops back, hits his back foot, and then he has to move off pressure. So his mind isn't, I need to get to number 2. Great quarterbacks will be able to avoid the pressure and flip and get to number 2 and throw it. Joe Burrow can do that. Jake Browning can't. And that's fine. You shouldn't expect him to do that. So you get in these adverse situations, and that's what really separates everything. I don't know how many times we've gone through it just this year, but Josh Dobbs twice, just these backup quarterbacks, they have the run and they can get hot and they can do that. But, at the end of the day, there's kind of a reason they're backups. And even if he's a good backup, like I think Browning, I'd still consider him a good backup. He can get out there. He can run the offense when things are working around him. He is awesome, but he's not a secret star in waiting. He's not a guy you're going to trade Joe Burrow and run it with him type of situation. It seems this is not a Joe Bledsoe, Jake Brady type of injury that caused this. But I have a little bit of confidence, but I have until I can see him win despite losing up front. I'm not going to, I don't know how I can be super confident. And I'm a little worried that the Chiefs are just going to dominate them up front defensively. When you look at Chris Jones, you look at George Karlaftis and all these guys and the guys that got after them in the AFC Championship game. Now, I know that the line is healthier, it's better, etc. But you're telling me that the Chiefs aren't going to be putting a big red target on Orlando Brown in this game? They're going to want to get him. They're going to throw everything at that guy. I'm expecting Chris Jones lined up over him, even if he's better from inside.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are coming off an embarrassing home loss.
Yeah,
Big
too.
Christmas Day game and in a place where they're not playing well this season, to be honest with you. They've actually played better on the road this regular season. So, we'll look forward to that later in the week and talk about that matchup. And, the big news is because we're recording this on a Tuesday, the Cincinnati Bengals are finally on their regular scheduled programming. So they're going to get back to practice on Wednesday. They had today off. We'll see if there's an update on Jamar Chase. CTB, who's I feel a little more confident he's going to be back out there. And that would be huge for the defensive side of the ball because we'll get to that in just a moment when you look at the cornerback room. But overall, Jamar Chase, Zach Taylor did say the next day that he's still day-to-day. So we'll see if he's out there. That would be obviously a huge receiver to get back for the biggest receiver to get back for this Kansas City game and for Jake Browning overall. But I want to stay with the offense. We'll move on from Jake Browning and talk about the running game because there was a lot of criticism. Not surprised because when you lose, everybody's mad at the play caller. Everybody's mad at the head coach.
Like we talked about, it's the Birdman meme. They're sitting there, hands rubbing, waiting for Zach Taylor to have a game where the offense doesn't do well, and they're going to blame him. Even if he scored 30 points 3 weeks in a row with a backup quarterback against at least one good defense, does not matter. Doesn't matter. They're rubbing their hands. They're waiting.
Let me ask you this. Did Zach Taylor throw the 3 interceptions?
No, and I think there were situations that like I was like, oh, I don't like this. Yeah. But the main one everybody was complaining about, right? Is obviously the 3 interceptions that's on the quarterback, especially because I thought all 3 of those interceptions he could have thrown the ball away in the first one, and I thought he had an answer on the second one that he just didn't get to, and I think that's also true on the third one. So he just he's kind of forcing it. That series of downs, 2nd and 1, they run that little flare screen where they run this all the time with Burrow to Trent Irwin. It is there. It's open, but Browning throws it short and behind him. So Irwin completely stops, has to bend down, sit down, pick the ball up off the ground, and then try to go. And he's tackled inches short. He's tackled basically right at the line of scrimmage there. So you just wasted 2nd and 1, but the play call worked. It just wasn't executed. The quarterback couldn't make a 12-yard type throw there. Just get it out to the flat and forward, lead him forward because there was room. It was an access type throw, and there was access on that throw. Anyway, you get the 3rd down. They can't pick up 3rd and 1 with a run play. So they get to inches. If I had to put money, like if I had to set the odds on the Bengals picking up 4th and inches with a run play, 50-50 almost feels like optimistic just because of how bad it was up front. And the Steelers are going to be ready for it. So the Steelers did get ready for it. They played man coverage everywhere, and they put everybody else into the fit. The Bengals threw the ball to T. Higgins, but the ball didn't get anywhere near T. Higgins, and that ends 4th down. But when I'm looking at that, I just go like, yeah, maybe that would have picked it. Maybe you could have picked it up in the run game, but you didn't pick it up on 3rd and 1. So 4th and inches. quarterback sneak. Maybe that's a call you could go for, but I
Yeah.
just when I didn't hate it. Like I didn't hate the idea of taking a shot to your best receiver against their rookie corner. You just have to actually give him a possibility to win that shot and not throw it 5 yards short. So he's trying to make a falling over diving catch through the other player. I don't know. I didn't hate that. I hated when they went back-to-back screens on one series, and that put them in 3rd and 11. I hated some of the other stuff like that. It just felt conservative at times, and some of that is also the quarterback was throwing picks when they tried to be aggressive, and they can't run the ball. So they just, it just felt like the entire game they were just done other than throws to T. There's just throws to T were basically the only offense that I trusted. Everything else was just dead on arrival, at least when the game was tight and competitive, which wasn't that long, but
Yeah, if the fourth and inches worked, we would have loved it. We would have said, "Oh, great call. Didn't see it coming."
gave your guy a shot. Yeah.
Yeah, get a touchdown there. Huge for them. So yeah, it's just it wasn't working for them. And when you're down and the game isn't going your way, and as I mentioned before, when it's raining, it's pouring, you aren't going to run the ball. You're not going to run the ball when you're down by 3 scores. You're
No,
going to
they're
try.
down 24 what at the start. When they got the ball back in the third quarter, they were down 24-0. Like that's it.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them. You want to catch up in this game. You still think you have a shot. And, I thought even when T. Higgins scored the touch, I'm like, well, maybe they will start to play better in the second half. But honestly, they couldn't stop them defensively. And, there were just moments in that game, as we mentioned before. It's a different game when you don't have your franchise quarterback in there with this offense. And, we've noticed that a lot this season. It's just been so up and down. And then obviously, as I mentioned before, or even after the game that next morning, I said, you know what? Those 3 games were a lot of fun. I had a blast, and it gave me a little bit of hope. And if they beat Kansas City, will I talk myself into, well, what if? What if they do it? What if they beat Cleveland? What if Cleveland is resting their starters in that final game? Because it won't change anything. If they win on Sunday, they will stay at the number 5 seed. And if Baltimore wins, it doesn't change the seeding for them. And then maybe they're resting guys, and maybe Cincinnati does get in. Maybe they do begin, I'll think about that when it happens, but you just lost a huge opportunity. There's a lot of what if games this season. Even when Joe Burrow was healthy, I think back at the Texans game. What if Tyler Boyd catches the ball? What if you play better in that game? What if you stop their running back? And these 2 games versus the Pittsburgh Steelers are just 2 big what if games. And it wasn't close, obviously, in this past one. But even the first matchup, it was just a sloppy game. And it was obviously Jake Browning's first start. But offensively, I want to move on from that. Is there anything you would like to say about the offense?
No, I think that's about it. I don't know. I think there's not much else. I think there's not reason to be optimistic about how they could perform against the Chiefs defense, but the Chiefs defense is also good. So we'll see. I would expect the Chiefs are going to steal their game plan and not try to do anything that Browning could take advantage of until he shows he can beat a very basic load the box, play cover 3 type of situation.
Yeah, I'm expecting a huge bounce back for this Chiefs game for the Kansas City Chiefs. I know they've looked bad for a while now. They really just haven't looked like themselves, but I think that they'll find a way. We'll see what it looks like. And look, if Cincinnati surprises them, then good for them. Get a huge win on the road at Arrowhead in December. But moving on to the defensive side of the football for the Cincinnati Bengals, this is disappointing on so many levels, because during that 3-game stretch, there were times where I thought, you know what, defensively, I see glimpses of Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson stepping up, being the Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, just from this game a week ago prior to that. And to see what you're seeing out of your linebacker room and explosive plays for Cheeto, when I feel like Cheeto's back. He doesn't feel totally back from the ACL, and this is a huge contract year for him. I don't think he's back in Cincinnati after this year, just because they do have Cam Taylor, Britt, DJ Turner, and maybe they'll pick up another corner. But overall, it just felt like a disappointing game for a lot of the veterans on the defensive side of the ball.
Yes. And the young guys. It was everybody.
Everybody. Right? I shouldn't say like, yeah, DJ Turner. I mean, there's so many different players.
So, yeah, I mean, look at it and it's just,
yeah.
I mean, the George Pickens of it all, that he just, he had all that, negative press going into the game. Then the game happened and it was just like, oh, okay. And I almost felt like we should have expected this, right? Like, I feel like I've seen this before where a wide receiver starts getting blasted in the media for effort and all this other stuff. They just kind of feed him a little bit. He shows what he is. he dunked on everybody. What can you say? I mean, he made an incredible catch on that one play where he got both feet down. I had no idea how he could do that. He made the catch and run was so disappointing, mainly from Dax Hill, because Dax Hill comes off the roof of the defense, goes to make the tackle, and instead of this being a 12-yard play, and you just go, shucks, like, well, at least we have another series of down. Hill is out of control and takes a bad angle, and he ends up taking out DJ Turner, who's trying to catch him from behind. So now it's a foot race with Jermaine Pratt, and I think there was somebody else, but I can't remember who it was, but it's just, yeah, Pickens wins that foot race because he had a step on them to start, and he's faster than those guys. But you had a chance to control this, like contain this fire. And instead, you tried to go make a big hit, or just kind of were playing too fast, and the game was moving fast for you. Whatever the issue was, it just compounded it. And that seemed to just happen everywhere. And they got out physicaled up front again. It's, the Steelers' offensive line was able, and they were able to move them and run the ball. And everybody's talking about Mason Rudolph about, like, well, the Steelers are even doing like the whole Rudolph or Pickett. I think they're starting Rudolph next week, even if Pickett's healthy. Yeah. So you get out physical. We just talked about the other end where the Bengals got out physical on offense. Well, when you're out physicaling them on the defensive, when they're on defense and you're on offense doing the physicality part of this, you can run the ball, you can pass protect, you can run the ball, and then they can't pass rush as hard because you're able to run the ball so effectively. And even when all that fails, you've got a guy that's just making incredible catches, dunks left and right. Yeah, 5 catches, 195 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, averaging almost 40 yards a catch. It's just, that is such a tough way to try to play defense. And then, when, like you talked about, it's a lot of guys that you're disappointed in. Talked about Dax Hill there. You could talk about the guys that stepped in for Reader. You could talk about Lou if you want, just like he's not figuring it out without Reader, and this whole year, basically. The linebackers, they had a step up last week, then they're back down this week. And then outside, I think that was also really disappointing was the corner situation with Cheeto, like you mentioned, and DJ Turner, where Pickens just did whatever he wanted on both of them, where he caught that long ball on Cheeto, and it was technique. Maybe the recovery speed would be there before the ACL injury, but he's in a press situation. He doesn't keep his cushion, but he also doesn't jam him. So the receiver just runs by him because, that's what's going to happen if you don't disrupt him at all, and you're not going to keep a cushion to be able to react. He's just able to run by you. And, Turner, you could talk about, it's a young guy up and down. This was a down, but I'm not off of him. I just think that it's just frustrating to be a rookie corner and to get beat like this. So, like, who are you happy about on the defensive side of the ball in that game? I don't know. Hendrickson, maybe, just
because he toughed it out.
Basically, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's like I started the offensive one with you, and I just said, like, what was good about the offense? Same goes for the defense, but the defense has been a disaster all year. So you might have expected it a little bit. I was thinking they'd be able to do something in this game for them. I said Henderson because he had a sack, but I think it was also an unblocked sack, wasn't it, or no? I don't remember 100%. But it's just such a disgusting game in every sense of the word. Offense, defense, not special teams though. We could get to it. We could get to that, but offense and defense was terrible, and the defense is a real big concern. It's, some of it is like, oh, those young guys, they'll get better, they'll gel. But what do you do about the vets that are playing worse than they were? And what do you do about losing talent on a defense that's already really leaky? I don't know. I don't have the answers for these things. That's what I'm thinking of. And then you're talking about, like, when you're in the draft, we got to replace Boyd. We might have to replace Higgins down the road. We could use Brock Bowers type tight end. We could use some offensive line help. But man, that defense it's a real concern. It's a real big concern.
So, well, not to do too much, into the offseason or anything like that, but this team, when it comes to cap hits and what that looks like, it won't really hit for the Joe Burrow effect going into the 2024 season. So I do think that this team can't let off the gas when it comes to a free agent on the defensive side of the ball. I do think you do need to get a guy, and maybe it's not like the move they made for DJ Reader in 2020, but they can't be afraid to add defensive talent because they're going to need it. To be determined if maybe they work something out with DJ Reader and it's a 1-year deal and he starts the season on short-term IR. We don't know what that looks like, but it does make me nervous on the defensive side of the ball because despite how the offense could look, they could have a down day. They could look off in the playoffs or really they couldn't get something going. But the defense, you could always rely on them to either create a turnover or just step up for Lou and those guys. And a lot of the guys are out there. I know Jesse Bates is pretty much having an all-pro year for the Atlanta Falcons, and that's obviously missed. Von Bell is not playing his best football, but still 2 safeties for this defense that were a big part of it and their success in the postseason. And what we've noticed over the last 2 years. There are some people out there that are like, get rid of Lou, fire Lou too. And I'm not,
Really?
I'm not that person. I think it's there.
I'm just not. I'm not in that
Oh, no,
section
no,
of
no.
Bengals Twitter. I think.
I'm not
No, I not you. I'm a little bit surprised by it, but then again, I don't see everything.
I had somebody ask me today, maybe they'll bring Marvin Lewis back as the defensive coordinator. I'm like, that is never going to happen, and that would be a terrible decision. It's for
Neither
me.
side would want that.
What do you think? Is going on though with this defense overall, just the overall picture of the season. We don't even have to focus on the Steelers game, but what is going to be the problem like going forward for this defense? Because there's still a lot of guys that are going to be returning next year.
Some of it starts with the safety plays worse, just is. And I think it's the spine of the defense is just took a big step back. I think Reader was playing good. I think I would be remiss to say he was playing the same level, but I still think he was probably the most consistently good part of the defense. Every week in, week out, he would give a good performance and sometimes give a really, really high-end performance. It just wasn't as often as he did last year. And some of that could also be because I feel like the guys around him weren't playing up to that. And especially when you talk about the depth of the interior of the defensive line, it's terrible. And it showed again this week where you've got 68 and 95 just getting thrown around back there. So that's an issue. And that leads to the linebackers having more issues because the past 2 years, they've been able to play slow and fill things and play clean. They don't get hit by offensive linemen for the most part because Reader's taking 2 guys and Hill's doing a good job. And whatever else they've got cooking up front is just working so that they don't need to take on offensive line. But now they do, and they're not doing a great job of it. When they make the run-throughs, they're not getting to the ball carrier. They're just running through and taking themselves out of the play. I don't know why that keeps happening to them. And then they haven't been the same in coverage. It's just that's been also frustrating, whether it's landmarks and vision coverage or it's matching guys. They're just not able to do it. And sometimes they are really being taken advantage of in that situation. I think of Wilson in the Jaguars game where they knew they were going to get him on the running back, and they just sent the running back to the flat, threw it out to him, and knew he'd outrace him over there. It's just frustrating. And like we talked about, the safeties playing worse. So the entire spine, the middle of that defense is playing worse. And you can blame it on whoever, but one of those groups has to step up. I think Jordan Battle has been the best safety play they've had. And DJ Reader has been the best interior defensive lineman they've had. And he's been a little up and down on his consistency, but he's been able to make an impact most weeks. I think he's a fine starter. This is something separate, but why do they only have 4 interior defensive linemen in the first place? And then 2 of those guys are basically like practice squad level players. Yeah. So they play 3 defensive linemen when teams go heavy. When they not even that heavy, when they get into an I formation or 12 personnel, the Bengals respond by adding a 3rd interior defensive lineman and playing bear fronts and stuff. So getting their 5-2-3-4. Why wouldn't you have 6 interior defensive linemen, 5 interior defensive linemen, and you need at least 3 starting quality defensive interior guys? They don't have that. I don't understand, because that is something that I've seen repeatedly of, like, if I was an offense and when Reader was healthy, one of the things I would do would be check 95 in terms of let's run it at that guy and see if he could stop it. and because he'd be out there as part of their base package. I would get 12 and 21 and get Mike Hilton off the field. It's just like you shouldn't have an answer like that available to the opposition, but it is. And even when Hilton's on the field and the other team's in 11 personnel, they're just not playing well. They're just whatever it is. It's just that unit is playing well below expectations, and it's almost everybody. I think Trey Hendrickson is probably the only guy playing above expectations, other than Jordan Battle for a rookie 3rd-round pick. He's playing above expectations. Kid Taylor Britt was playing above expectations before the injury. Mm-hmm. But you look at guys like got paid, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, below expectations. DJ Reader meeting my high expectations. You could say above expectations if you want, but BJ Hill probably meeting what I thought. Sam Hubbard, I want to see him win against some of these right tackles more often, but he's still a pretty good run stopper. I don't know. Dax Hill below expectations at this point. It was up and down and fun to start, but it's been a couple down weeks in a row. And maybe if he was catching these interceptions instead of dropping them, I'd feel different. But it's just overall, like, guys not playing well in the same scheme that they've been in for years. It's a little mind-boggling.
Yeah, it really is. It's disappointing because there are a lot of guys that have returned to this defense, and it doesn't look the same. And maybe it is going to be just this offseason project of we'll see what happens in the draft in the 1st and 2nd round, and or maybe they do spend it in free agency, but they do have to do something because they don't have DJ Reader's replacement. And even if DJ Reader is back, that is a long rehab process, something he's experienced before, and I would be shocked if he's ready to go by the time they start in September. So, yeah, there's a lot of question marks on the defense. It really has been disappointing because even when Joe went down, I thought to myself, I don't know if this team can make a run because the defense has been really disappointing this season, and they've found a way offensively. And then there were moments where I thought, okay, all right, defense, you maybe they can. Maybe they
played up in the biggest moments too. Yeah. Like I got to give them some credit because they did a good job against the 49ers. They did a good job against the Bills.
You're right.
When they played these high octane offenses, they seemed to step it up and play, but then they can't figure anything out against the Steelers. Nick Mullins.
I know they won the game, but like
Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett. It's like a lot of the guys that are probably looking to be replaced, they are, looks like they are food for, and then they are doing what they do and taking down the good opponents. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't. It's a wild year in the NFL. I mean, goodness, I don't even want to get into what the MVP looks like right now. It feels like such an odd year. Even watching some of these Christmas Day games, it felt like, am I watching preseason football right now? It just doesn't feel like a normal NFL season. And of course, in Cincinnati, it's not going to feel like that when your franchise quarterback's down. But we'll see what happens. We'll look ahead to the Kansas City Chiefs game again. The Cincinnati Bengals right now, they have a 17% chance of making the playoffs. If they do beat Kansas City, it is over 50%. A lot of eyes on those 1:00 games. They could, help or hurt the Cincinnati Bengals going into it. So I guess you are going to be watching other teams. If they win the next two, it's like a 95% chance they make the playoffs, but it's one game at a time for this club, and they're hoping to get that bounce back game. Big injury news, or what we're going to be watching later this week when they do hit the practice field. Does Jamar Chase return? Does Cam Taylor-Britt return for the defense? You need to at least get one or both for this game. Would be huge boost, obviously, going into these final two. What's going to be up on all Bengals right now?
I got nothing right now. I
don't blame you.
Like what it felt, the wind was taken out of the sails of everything. Like as a fan, as an analyst, as whatever, it just felt like, oh man. I mean, maybe it's just a Chiefs preview later or something. Like they have to win this game, so let's take a look at it. Or maybe it's eventually just looking at like how the Steelers really in 2 games dominated the Bengals offense. But nothing while you're listening to this. I'm not going to have anything up yet.
You know what's frustrating? We'll watch the Steelers on Sunday look like they did against the Patriots and the Arizona Cardinals, and it'll be so frustrating that Cincinnati just laid a huge egg on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But we'll see what it looks like. Again, they're not out of it, so at least that is something over the next 2 weeks before they get into either they're going into the offseason, plenty of draft talk, plenty of free agency talk, plenty of Joe Burrow rehab talk, or it's going to be, let's see what this team can do in the postseason. To be determined for the Cincinnati Bengals, make sure you're following along over on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. Check out all of his work on all Bengals. You can follow me at LNDS Patterson. We will be back later this week to preview a big New Year's Eve game, the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.